Democratic Alliance is gunning for Busisiwe Mkhwebane. Last week, the party submitted a letter to the Speaker of Parliament to guide the House when it considers removing the head of a Chapter 9 institution. The Rules Committee met yesterday to discuss the matter. Mkhwebane's independence and legal knowledge has been questioned. She's had several personal cost orders made against her and had some recommendations either overturned or suspended. The DA's Chief Whip, John Steenhuisen, joins us now from Cape Town to discuss this. Good morning to you, John Steenhuisen. Where are we in this matter?
Well, yesterday the Rules Committee met in Parliament, Jane, and agreed that they would submit the draft rules that the DA drafted and submitted to a subcommittee of the Rules Committee, which will meet on this coming Friday and begin the process to start drafting the rules that would guide the procedures to remove the head of a Chapter 9 institution from their position, provided the grounds set out in the Constitution are met. This is obviously the first step in the process that would see someone like Busisiwe Mkhwebane, for instance, being called before Parliament to have their fitness to hold office tested and potentially being removed from office.
And, I mean, obviously this Chapter 9 institution affects quite a few officers. What sort of pushback do you think you'll be getting to this?
Well, I don't think there can be any pushback. I think that we have a lacuna at the moment which Parliament is now stepping in to address, and that while the Constitution empowers Parliament to remove the Public Protector and other Chapter 9 heads, it has not fleshed out that process. And so what Parliament is busy doing now is fleshing out the process that must be followed for Parliament to effect the powers that are granted to it by the Constitution to do so. So there shouldn't be any pushback from the heads of the Chapter 9 institutions. This process is there because the constitutional framers provided the safeguard that when you had somebody like Mrs. Mkhwebane, who's clearly gone rogue and is patently unfit, an improper person to be occupying that office, that there is a safeguard, and that safeguard is Parliament. But Parliament must act fairly, openly and transparently, and that's what these rules will seek to do in guiding that process.
The inability to remove people like the Public Protector, like the drunk judge some 12 years ago, which has cost the taxpayer millions. I mean, what sort of impact is it having on you and me?
Well, the big concern here in this instance is that the longer you have unsuitable, inappropriate and rogue individuals occupying these important offices, the more long-term damage it does to the credibility and integrity of those officers. Mrs. Mkhwebane, for instance, as you have said, has had several costs ordered, some very embarrassing reversals, and has had her integrity questioned by the highest court of the land, and yet she languishes in office. Most other constitutional office bearers would have done the honourable thing and resigned. She is, however, choosing to tough it out, and in doing so is doing enormous harm to the credibility and integrity of that important constitutional office. So it is important that we have these mechanisms to protect those officers from individuals and incumbents who do disservice and dishonour to those officers.
And John, tell me what you think about what the National Assembly Speaker Thandi Modise said about this Chapter 9. She said institutions said it's unfair, the criticism against Parliament. She said we were a country that was looking at honour, service, honesty, all the traits of a good leader when we were putting in the men and women who were going to serve. The fact that it took 25 years before we look at mechanisms to remove also tells you how positive South Africa was about capacity and its stance on good leadership.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, and I concur with her. I think that the Constitution and many of the regulations were designed for the Mandelas, the Tambos and the Sisulus. I don't think they were necessarily had the Zumas and many of these other rogue elements, the Magashules and the Mabuzas, in mind when they were crafted. And that's why the duty now falls to us as parliamentarians and the current custodians of the Constitution to make sure that we firewall these institutions from elements that go rogue, so that we can have that accountability which is so sorely lacking in South Africa. We need consequence management in South Africa. Far too often those who transgress just simply move on into other positions and carry on with their behaviour. I think we've got an opportunity now to turn a page and to bring real accountability and transparency to government and to restore people's trust and faith in the institutions of state. And you do that by removing and going hard after the rogue elements and restoring that integrity and credibility in those offices of state.
Good to talk to you, John. Thank you very much.